Mara, a quiet young Omega refugee with no rank or family protection, has spent 3 years being treated as worthless inside the Iron Pack until 6 elite guards led by the brutal Bren ambush and violently assault her in the forest. Left broken and abandoned, Mara's dormant Thornwood bloodline finally awakens, releasing an ancient wolf unlike any ordinary Omega. She returns to the Iron Pack's fortress, transforms before the 6 guards in the Great Hall, and single-handedly defeats all of them without killing them, exposing their abuse before the entire pack. Elder Osa forces the guards to confess everything to Alpha Kaelen, who strips them of their elite status rather than punishing Mara, recognizing that they disgraced the pack while she merely defended herself. Osa then reveals that Mara is the last survivor of the legendary Thornwood bloodline, whose wolves answer to no alpha by rank and were nearly exterminated by the previous alpha because they refused to submit to his tyranny. As news spreads, the neighboring Ashvin pack, loyal to the old alpha's political allies, arrives to identify Mara and later launches an armed assault on the Iron Pack to eliminate her before her bloodline can be restored. Kaelen chooses to protect Mara instead of surrendering her, openly declaring her a member of his pack despite the political consequences. During the battle, Mara's unique Thornwood wolf disrupts the natural dominance hierarchy that all other wolves instinctively obey, allowing her to defeat Ashvin leader Grath and break the invading forces' morale, leading to the Iron Pack's victory. With the invasion repelled, Kaelen calls for a territorial council to challenge the old political order, while Mara fully embraces her identity as the last Thornwood wolf. She realizes that the true legacy of her bloodline is not extraordinary strength alone, but the refusal to let powerful people define her worth, finally rejecting the years of abuse that convinced her she was nothing and standing proudly as the rightful heir to a bloodline the world failed to erase. Look at the little forest creature now. She thought she could defy you, Bren. Pathetic. The largest guard seized her by the throat and lifted her off the ground with one hand. She did not fight, she did not scream, she hung there thin and small, her feet dangling above the dirt, while 5 other elite guards stood in a half circle and laughed. They were the best warriors in the Iron Pack, chosen by the Alpha himself, trained since boyhood to shift faster and hit harder than any wolf in the territory. And they had chosen this evening to use all of that power on one small Omega who had done nothing but walk the wrong path at the wrong time. The largest one, Bren, leaned close to her face. "You are nothing," he said. "You will always be nothing." He threw her. She hit the ground hard and did not rise quickly. The others moved in. What they did in that clearing lasted long enough that the sun began to sink behind the stone ridge. Then they left her there, broken still, bleeding, into the dirt of the ancient forest floor. They did not look back. They should have, because 1 hour later the screaming started at the east gate of the Iron Pack's fortress, and it did not stop until every one of those 6 guards had fallen. Now, before we go any further into this story, let me ask you something. If you were that Omega lying in the dirt, what would you have done in that 1 hour? Would you have run, or would you have gone back? Drop your answer in the comments right now, and while you are there, hit that subscribe button because this story is only getting started and you do not want to miss what comes next. All right, thank you. Now let's get back to the story. Her name was Mara. Not a warrior's name. Not a name that made men step aside or children go quiet. It was the name her mother had given her before her mother died, and it was the only thing of value she had carried into the Iron Pack's territory 3 seasons ago. She had come as a refugee, a packless wolf, an Omega without a bloodline strong enough to matter, without a guardian, without a rank that gave her any right to speak or eat at the main fire or walk certain paths after dark. The path she had taken that evening was the Eastern Forest Trail, the one that cut behind the stone granary and led to the washing river where the Omega women collected water before nightfall. It was not a forbidden path, it was simply a path that the elite guards used when they wanted to move without being seen. And on this evening, they had not wanted to be seen. Bren saw her first. He was the largest of the 6, a man who had shifted to wolf form and back so many times that his shoulders never fully lost the shape of the beast. He had a broad jaw and small eyes and a reputation inside the Iron Pack for doing things that his rank protected him from answering for. The other 5 guards behind him were cut from the same stone. Dark, who was fast. Rolf, who was cruel in the quiet way that is worse than loud cruelty. Kaim, who laughed at everything. Horse and Pell, who did whatever Bren decided and asked no questions after. They had been drinking fermented grain brew since midday. It was in their eyes and in the loose way they held their bodies when they stopped in the middle of the trail and looked at Mara. She stopped walking. She had learned early that stopping was better than running. Running triggered something in the elite wolves, something old and animal that made them give chase without thinking. So she stopped and she held the clay water jar against her chest and she looked at the ground the way Omegas were expected to look. Bren walked toward her slowly. "You are on a guard trail," he said. "I did not know," she answered. Her voice was steady, which was either brave or foolish, and she was not sure which. "You did not know." Bren repeated and looked back at the others. Kaelen laughed first, the rest followed. What happened after that was not quick. Bren took the jar from her hands and dropped it. It broke against a root. Then he took her by the throat the way the hook of this story already told you, and he lifted her. And she hung there above the dirt with the evening light falling through the trees and the 5 others making a half circle the way wolves always do when they are not hunting but playing, which is the more dangerous of the two. She did not fight, she had learned that too. Fighting an elite guard as an Omega was not courage, it was a reason for them to do more, but something was happening inside her body that none of them could see. It had been happening for 3 seasons quietly like a fire that has been covered with ash but not put out. The wolf inside her, the one the Iron Pack's elder had declared too weak to be of any rank, was not weak. It had simply never been allowed to breathe. Every time she had been pushed, it breathed a little. Every time she'd been overlooked, dismissed, and made to feel like nothing that moved or thought or needed it breathed a little more. Bren threw her, and she hit the ground, and the jar's broken pieces cut her palms, and she lay in the dirt and did not rise fast enough to satisfy them, so they came closer, and Rolf pulled her upright by her hair and said something that she did not fully hear because the sound in her ears was not the sound of his voice anymore. It was something older, something from deep inside the bloodline she had never been allowed to claim. They did not kill her. That would have required answering to the Alpha, and even elite guards had limits that were shaped by consequence rather than conscience. They stopped when Bren decided they had stopped. He looked down at her on the ground and said the thing he always said to people he had broken: "You are nothing. You will always be nothing." Then they shifted. 6 wolves, massive and dark, rose from where 6 men had stood. Fur replaced skin, and bone cracked and reformed the way it always did, loud and fast, and then they were gone into the trees, running for the pleasure of running, already forgetting her the way powerful things forget the small damage they leave behind. Mara lay in the dirt, the blood from her palms soaked into the earth. One of her knees had twisted when she fell, and it burned with a dull and steady heat. Her throat hurt where Bren's hand had been. She looked up at the sky through the canopy of the ancient trees, and the first stars were beginning to appear above her, small and cold and indifferent. She thought about her mother. Her mother had been an Omega too. But her mother had known something that she had only half told Mara before she died. Something about their bloodline. Something about what the women of their line carried that looked like weakness from the outside and was not weakness at all. She had begun the telling of it one winter night, and then a sickness had come into the settlement, and her mother had not finished the sentence. And Mara had carried the half-told secret for years like a stone in her chest. She pressed her bleeding palms flat against the earth. The earth was warm. That was not unusual in the summer season, but it felt unusual now, felt purposeful, felt like the ground itself was pushing back up against her hands. Her wolf stirred. Not the small frightened stirring she had felt for 3 seasons. This was different. This was the stirring of something that has finally decided it is done waiting. Mara closed her eyes. She did not know what was coming. She only knew that she was going to stand up and she was going to walk back in the direction of the Iron Pack's fortress, and something was going to be different when she arrived. She stood, her knee held, she walked. The broken jar stayed on the ground behind her. She did not look back at it. There was no water in it anyway, and she was not thirsty for water anymore. The eastern forest trail was empty as she moved through it. The trees on either side were older than the Iron Pack, older than the name anyone had given this territory. Their roots came up through the soil like the knuckles of buried hands, and she stepped over them without slowing. 1 hour, that was how long it took her to walk from the clearing to the east gate of the Iron Pack's fortress. That was how long the wolf inside her had to finish what it had been building for 3 seasons. By the time the stone wall of the fortress appeared through the trees, Mara was not walking the way she had been walking when she left. The guards at the east gate saw her coming and did not move at first because they did not recognize her. That should have told them something. It told them nothing. She walked through the gate and into the torchlit yard beyond it, and the wolf inside her chest was no longer breathing like a covered fire. It was an open flame, and somewhere inside the fortress, in the great hall where elite guards drank and boasted and forgot the Omegas, they had broken the 6 men who had shifted back to human form were laughing at a story one of them was telling. They would not be laughing for much longer. The torch-lit yard of the Iron Pack's fortress was never fully quiet at night. There were always servants moving between the stone buildings, always the distant sound of the Alpha's warhounds in their pen, always the low voices of perimeter guards calling to each other across the walls. It was a fortress built on noise the way other things are built on stone noise that meant order, noise that meant the pack was alive and in control of itself. When Mara walked through the east gate, the noise did not stop, but it changed. The two gate guards turned to look at her, and something in the way they looked made the nearest servant pause with a water vessel balanced on her shoulder. A warhound in the pen lifted its head and did not put it back down. Small things, the kind of things that happen when the air shifts before a storm that the sky has not yet shown. Mara walked past all of them without speaking. She knew where the Great Hall was. Every Omega in the fortress knew where the Great Hall was the way prey knows where the predator sleeps. You knew it, so you could avoid it. She had avoided it for 3 seasons without a single exception. She walked toward it now. The elder of the Iron Pack was a woman named Osa. She was old enough that no one remembered her without the lines that crossed her face, and she had held her position through 4 alphas by knowing things before they happened. She was crossing the yard between the elder's chamber and the grain store when she saw Mara. Osa stopped. She looked at the girl the way a woman looks at something that has changed in a way she cannot immediately name. Her eyes moved from Mara's face to her hands to the way she was carrying her body as she walked. Girl, Osa said. Mara stopped. She turned to look at the elder. What happened to you? Osa asked, not with softness, with the flat directness of a woman who has asked hard questions her entire life and stopped dressing them gently long ago. 6 guards on the eastern trail, Mara said. Osa was quiet for a moment. Bren, it was not a question. Yes. Osa looked at her hands again at the dried blood on her palms from the broken jar. Then she looked at Mara's face once more, and whatever she saw there made her take one slow step back. What are you about to do? Osa asked. What I should have done 3 seasons ago, Mara said. She turned and kept walking. Osa did not call after her. She did not send anyone to stop her. She stood in the yard with the water vessel servant still frozen nearby, and she watched the girl walk toward the great hall. And she said nothing because she had seen something in that face that told her nothing she said would matter, and because part of her, the part that had watched Bren and his kind move through this fortress without consequence for too many years, did not want to say anything at all. The great hall had heavy doors made from the wood of ancient trees bound with iron that the pack's first smith had beaten into shape generations ago. The doors were not barred from the inside. There was no reason to bar them. No one came to the Great Hall uninvited. No Omega had ever walked through those doors without being summoned. Mara pushed them open and walked in. The hall was lit by a long fire in the central pit. Bren and his 5 sat at the far table, still in human form, cups in hand, loud with the ease of men who have never once worried about what walks in behind them. Doc was mid-story when the doors opened. He trailed off. The others turned. The silence that followed was the kind that has weight. Bren looked at her. His expression moved from surprise to recognition to something that was almost amusement but sat too close to contempt to be distinguished from it. The Omega, he said. You came to the Great Hall. He looked at the others. She came to the Great Hall. Kael laughed because Kael always laughed. You want to make a complaint? Rolf asked, leaning back on the bench with his arms crossed. Go to the elders. But this is not the elders' hall. I did not come to complain, Mara said. Her voice in the Great Hall was not the voice she had used on the Eastern Trail. It filled the space differently. Bren noticed it. She could see that he noticed it by the way his jaw tightened just slightly before his face settled back into the mask of a man who is not concerned. Then what did you come for? Bren asked. She did not answer with words. The shift began in her feet. It moved upward through her legs and spine the way heat moves through iron, slow at first and then all at once. Bone and muscle and skin rearranged themselves in the firelight, and the sound of it was loud in the stone hall, loud and deep, and nothing like the quick, clean shifts of the elite guards who had trained their bodies to change fast and silent. This was not fast, this was not trained. This was something older than training. The wolf that rose in the great hall where Mara had been standing was not what any of them expected. They had seen her shifted form once months ago at the ranking ceremony where the elder had declared her too weak for any meaningful position. That wolf had been small, thin, the kind of wolf that the pack's children shifted into before they grew into their full strength. This wolf was not that. Haas stood up from the bench so fast he knocked his cup to the floor. Pelt took 2 steps back without meaning to. Dark stopped breathing for a moment and then remembered to start again. Bren did not move. He stared. His hands were flat on the table and his knuckles had gone pale. The wolf in the hall looked at him. Not the way a wolf looks at a threat. The way a wolf looks at something it has already decided the outcome of, shift. Kaelen said to Bren, his voice no longer carrying any laughter. Bren, shift. Bren shifted, the others followed. 6 wolves filled the great hall, large and dark, and the fire in the central pit threw their shadows long across the stone walls. They were elite guards. They had trained for combat in wolf form since boyhood. They had fought border wolves and rogue packs, and they had always won. The wolf that was Mara did not wait for them to organize. She moved. What happened in the great hall that night was not a fight in the way that word is usually meant. A fight has 2 sides pushing against each other with roughly matched force until one side breaks. What happened in the great hall was something else. It was the moment when something that has been held down for a very long time is released. And the release is larger than anyone standing nearby had calculated for. Mara took Kaelen first because he was closest to the door and because he was still not fully settled into his wolf form when she reached him. She hit him with her shoulder, and the impact drove him into the stone wall, and he dropped and did not rise. Not dead, she had not aimed to kill, she had aimed to end, which is a different thing, and she understood the difference clearly even inside the wolf form where some thinking becomes animal and only the deepest intentions survive the shift. Jack came at her from the left. He was fast, the fastest of the 6, and in any other circumstance that speed would have mattered. She turned into his charge rather than away from it and used his momentum against the angle of the floor, and he went down hard on the stone. Rolf and Pell came together. That was trained behavior. Elite guards were taught to double up on a target that had proven it could handle a single attacker. It was a sound strategy. Against another elite guard, it would have worked. She took Pell's bite on her shoulder and ignored it the way stone ignores rain. So then drove her weight into Rolf's chest until his back met the long table and the table cracked under the impact and the cups and the clay vessels and the remains of the guard's evening meal went across the floor. Horse shifted back to human form. It was a panic decision. The kind a body makes when the wolf form does not feel like safety anymore and the human mind grabs for control it cannot actually exercise. He pressed himself against the far wall with his hands up. "Stop," he said. "Stop, we yield." She looked at him. He slid down the wall until he was sitting on the floor with his knees pulled up and his hands still raised. His face had gone the color of old ash. That left Bren. Bren had not run and had not yielded. He was standing in the center of the hall, still in wolf form, and he was the largest wolf in the room by a measure that had always made him the unchallenged top of his group. His pack rank rested on that size and the speed behind it and the willingness to use both without hesitation. He had built his entire life inside this fortress on the certainty that he was the most dangerous thing in any room he entered. He was reconsidering that now. But Bren was not a man who surrendered easily. His pride was not a small thing he could set down and pick up later. It was structural. It held up everything else about who he was in this pack. If he yielded here in the Great Hall to an Omega with Haas watching from the floor and the other 4 down around him, there was no version of the morning after that he could survive as the man he had built himself to be. So he did not yield. He charged. She met him in the center of the hall where the fire pit burned between them and the heat of it rose around them both, and the sound of the impact was loud enough that the gate guards outside heard it through the stone walls and looked at each other without speaking. They went to the floor together. It was not clean. It was not the kind of combat that looks like anything from the outside except 2 wolves and a tremendous amount of force applied in a very small space. She got her jaws around the back of his neck, not to kill, not to tear, but to hold. And the hold said everything that needed to be said. He went still. Every wolf knows that hold. It is the hold that ends things. The neck beneath another wolf's jaws is submission, whether the mind agrees or not. The body knows. The body has always known. Bren's body went still, and his legs stopped pushing, and the growl in his chest died down to nothing. She held the position for a moment that felt longer than it was. Then she released him and stepped back and shifted back to human form in the firelight. And the shift back was as slow and deliberate as the shift forward had been. And when it was done, she was Mara again, standing in the ruined great hall with broken furniture around her and 5 elite guards on the floor and 1 on his feet in human form against the wall and Bren lying still in wolf form in the center of the room. She was breathing hard. Her shoulder where Pell had bitten her was bleeding steadily, but she stood straight and did not reach for it. Bren shifted back to human. He lay on the stone floor and looked up at the ceiling and did not speak. The doors of the great hall opened. Osa stood in the doorway. Behind her were 2 perimeter guards who had followed her when the noise reached the yard. Behind them, further back in the dark, the shapes of servants and other pack members who had heard and come to see. Osa looked at the hall. She looked at the 6 guards in various states of ruin. She looked at Mara. She said nothing for a long moment. Then she stepped inside and walked to the center of the hall and stood near the fire pit and looked at Bren on the floor. "Get up," she said to him. Bren got up slowly. He did not look at Mara. He looked at the floor, and then at the wall, and then at nothing. "You will go to the Alpha at first light," Osa said. "All 6 of you. And you will tell him exactly what you did on the Eastern Trail this evening and exactly what happened in this hall afterward, every word of it." Rolf, who was sitting up against the broken table holding his ribs, started to speak. "Elder, she attacked us in the Great Hall. She came here, and I know what happened," Osa said. She did not raise her voice. She never raised her voice. "I know what happened on the trail, and I know what happened here, and so does every person standing in that doorway. You will go to the Alpha, and you will tell him all of it." She turned to Mara. For a moment, the two of them looked at each other, the old woman and the Omega with blood on her shoulder and dried blood on her palms and the firelight moving across her face. "You should have your shoulder seen," Osa said. "I know," Mara said. "Come with me." Mara followed the elder out of the great hall. The crowd in the doorway parted for them without being asked. No one spoke. No one reached out to stop Mara or to touch her or to challenge what had just happened. They moved through the torchlit yard in silence. Behind them, the great hall sat open, its heavy doors still wide, the fire still burning inside it over the wreckage of the evening. And 6 elite guards who had ruled this fortress through fear and rank and the Alpha's blind trust sat among broken cups and split wood and tried to understand what had just changed. Everything had changed. They did not yet know how much. The Alpha of the Iron Pack was a man named Kador. He was not old, but he was not young either. He sat in the space between those two things where a man has enough experience to know what he does not know, but enough pride to pretend otherwise. He had ruled the Iron Pack for 11 years, inheriting the position from his father, who had been a harder man in every direction. And in those 11 years, he had kept the pack fed and the borders held and the internal order tight enough that no one had seriously challenged his seat. He had done this partly through strength and partly through delegation. The elite guard was his delegation. 6 wolves he trusted to handle the smaller violences so that he did not have to see them. He had known in the way that leaders know things they have chosen not to examine, that Bren's group operated with a roughness that went beyond their mandate. He had not examined it. He examined it now. They stood before him in the great chamber at the top of the fortress's central tower. All 6 of them at first light, as Osa had commanded. Kater sat in the stone chair that served as his seat of authority, and he listened to what they told him, and his face did not move much while he listened, but his hands on the arms of the chair went tighter as the telling went on. When Bren finished, the chamber was quiet. Kaelen looked at each of them in turn. Bren, who was holding himself with the posture of a man trying to look like he had not been put on the floor. Rolf, with his ribs bound in linen, came with a stillness about him that had not been there before. Doc and Haas and Pell standing close together the way wolves stand when they feel exposed. "One Omega," Kaelen said. "Yes," Bren said. "One packless Omega with no rank and no guardian." Bren said nothing this time, and she walked into the great hall and put all 6 of you on the floor. It was not a question. Kaelen already knew. Osa had come to him before dawn and told him everything, which was Osa's way of ensuring that the men standing before him could not shape the telling to favor themselves. Rolf spoke. Her wolf form was not natural. What she shifted into was not a normal Omega wolf. There is something wrong with her bloodline, or she has used something, some old working some. Enough, Kaelen said. Rolf stopped. Kaelen stood up from the stone chair. He was not the largest man in the room. Bren was larger. But the way Kaelen moved when he stood made the room feel smaller around the 6 guards, and that was its own kind of size. "You attacked a packless woman on a forest trail for your own amusement," he said. "You did this while carrying my mark on your shoulders while wearing the name of this pack's elite guard. Every wrong thing you did on that trail you did as my representatives. Do you understand what that means?" None of them answered. "It means that what you did in my name," Kata said, "and I will not carry that." He looked at Osa, who stood to the side of the chamber near the window with her hands folded and her face giving nothing away. "Strip them," he said. Osa nodded once. The elite guard mark was a scar worked into the left shoulder during the ceremony of appointment. A scar reopened and treated with pack ash until it raised into a permanent ridge of darkened skin that every wolf in the territory recognized. Stripping it was not a symbolic act, it was a physical one. It meant the mark would be cut away, the skin taken down to what was beneath, and the wound left to heal clean without the ash treatment leaving smooth skin where the ridge had been. It was the worst thing Kata could do to them short of exile. Bren looked up for the first time since the telling began. "Kata, you will call me Alpha," Kata said. A beat of silence. Alpha, Bren said, and the word cost him something visible. "She is an Omega, a packless refugee. Whatever she did in that pool, she attacked elite guards of the Iron Pack, and there must be an answer for that. There is an answer for it," Kata said. "The answer is that she defended herself against 6 wolves who outranked her by every measure this pack recognizes, and she survived, and I will not punish a wolf for surviving what should never have been done to her. The pack will see it as a weakness," Bren said. "If an Omega can walk into the Great Hall and the pack will see what I tell them to see," Kater said, "and what I will tell them is the truth. That 6 guards disgraced this pack on an eastern trail and were answered for it. That is not a weakness, that is the order." Bren's jaw worked, but no more words came out. The stripping was done by midday in the open yard, which was Osa's suggestion and Kador's agreement because a punishment that no one sees is only half a punishment. The pack gathered the way packs gather for things that matter quietly and completely, and they watched, and the 6 elite guards stood in a line and bore it because there was nothing else to do. Mara watched from the edge of the yard near the well. Her shoulder had been treated the night before by Osa's healer, a narrow woman named Voss, who worked without speaking and bound wounds tighter than was comfortable, but always cleanly. The bite had not gone deep enough to cause lasting damage. Mara's wolf, whatever it had become, or always been healed faster than Voss had expected, and she had said so without looking up from her work. Standing at the well now, Mara watched Bren's face as the mark was taken from his shoulder. He did not look at her. He stared at the middle distance with the flatness of a man who has decided that feeling nothing is the same as being unbothered. It was not the same. She could see the difference. She had spent 3 seasons reading the faces of people who held power over her, and she had become very good at it. Someone moved beside her. She turned. It was Kador. He had come down from the tower and crossed the yard without ceremony and stood now beside the well with his arms at his sides. He looked at the stripping for a moment, and then he looked at her. "You should have come to me," he said. "Would it have mattered?" she asked. He did not answer immediately, which was its own kind of answer. "I am telling you now that it would have," he said. "I am also telling you that I understand why you did not believe that." She looked at him. "What happens to me now, that depends on what you are," he said. "And I think neither of us fully knows that yet." He walked back toward the tower. Mara turned back to the yard and watched the last of the punishment carried out and felt nothing she could name clearly. Not satisfaction, not relief, not the relief she had expected to feel when it was over. What she felt was the wolf inside her, fully awake now, fully present, waiting for whatever came next. 3 days passed. The fortress went on around Mara the way fortresses do, with its routines and its hierarchies and its 10,000 small daily negotiations between rank and need. But something had shifted in the way the pack moved around her, and she felt it constantly. The way you feel a change in the weather before it arrives. Omegas, who had never spoken to her directly, brought food to the small shelter where she slept. A perimeter guard who had always looked through her when they passed in the yard now met her eyes and nodded. Children who had been taught by their parents to stay clear of packless wolves watched her from a distance with open curiosity rather than trained wariness. She did not know what to do with any of it. On the 4th morning, Osa came to her shelter before the sun had fully risen. The elder sat down on the low stone bench outside the door without being invited, which was Osa's way of communicating that the conversation they were about to have was not optional. Mara sat across from her on the ground with her back against the shelter wall and waited. "Your mother," Osa said. "What was her name?" Mara looked at her. "Sella." Osa was quiet for a moment. "Sella of the Thornwood line." It was not a question. Mara felt something move in her chest. "You knew her," Mara said. "I knew of her," Osa said. "The Thornwood line has not been spoken of openly in this territory for 30 years, not since the old Alpha declared them scattered and their bloodline stripped of pack recognition." Why, Mara asked. What did they do? They did not do anything, Osa said. That was the problem. They would not submit to the old Alpha's conscription. He wanted the Thornwood wolves for his border wars because of what they carried in their blood. They refused. He scattered them and called their line weak so that no pack in the territory would take them in without looking down on them. Mara sat with that for a moment. She never told me the full story. She would not have, Osa said. Telling it puts you in danger. Knowing your bloodline meant claiming it, and claiming it meant the old Alpha's remaining allies had a reason to move against you. The old Alpha is dead, Mara said. His allies are not, Osa said, and Kaelen does not yet know what you are. When he finds out, and he will find out, he will have a choice to make about what to do with you. I want you to understand that before he makes it. Mara looked at the elder's face. Or what am I? Osa reached into the fold of her outer wrap and brought out a small object. It was a piece of carved bone, old and smoothed by handling, with a pattern worked into it that Mara did not recognize immediately, and then did the way you recognize something you have seen only in the half-remembered images that come in sleep. Her mother had worn something like this. The Thornwood wolves were not simply strong, Osa said. Their wolves did not follow the pack hierarchy the way other wolves do. Their animals recognized only bloodline authority. A Thornwood wolf in full power does not submit to an alpha by rank. They submit by choice, or they do not submit at all. The old alpha knew this, and it frightened him, and he destroyed what frightened him. Mara looked at the carved bone, or tried to. Osa agreed, but she held the bone out. Mara took it and turned it over in her hands. It was warm from being carried against Osa's body, but beneath that warmth there was another warmth, something that came from inside the object itself or from inside her own palm meeting it. Where did you get this? Mara asked. Your mother left it with me, Osa said. When she passed through this territory 8 years ago before you came, she knew she was being followed and she could not carry it safely. She said if a young woman named Mara ever came to the Iron Pack, I should give it to her when the time was right. Mara looked up from the bone. She knew I would come here. She knew you would end up somewhere that tested you, Osa said. She believed you would survive the test. Yes, she left this for after. The yard beyond the shelter was beginning to fill with the morning's activity. Mara could hear the warhounds in the distant clang of the smith's work and the voices of pack members moving between the buildings. Kael will want to speak with you today, Osa said, standing. He has been patient for 4 days because I asked him to be. That patience is close to its end. When he calls for you, tell him the truth, all of it. And if he decides the truth is a threat to him, Mara asked. Osa looked at her steadily. Then you will have to make the same choice your mother made. But I do not think he will, and Kael is afraid of many things, but he is not afraid of strength the way his father was. She walked away across the yard, and Mara sat with the carved bone in her hand and felt the warmth of it against her palm and thought about her mother walking through this same territory 8 years ago, already followed, already carrying a secret too dangerous to keep but too important to lose, trusting a near stranger elder with the only thing she had left to give her daughter. The morning moved around her. When the A came from the tower, she was ready. She climbed the stone steps with the carved bone inside her wrap against her skin, and when she came into the great chamber, Kaelen was standing at the window looking out over the territory below, and he did not turn immediately when she entered. And in the moment before he did, she made her decision. She would tell him everything. Not because Osa had told her to, not because it was safe or because she trusted him fully or because she believed it would certainly go well. She would tell him because she was done carrying things in silence, and because whatever came next, she wanted it to come from a place where nothing was hidden. Kaelen turned from the window. Sit, he said. She sat. Tell me what you are, he said. She told him. Kaelen listened without interrupting. That was the first thing she noticed. Most men of rank listened to things they did not expect by interrupting them, breaking the telling into pieces small enough that they could manage each piece separately without having to hold the full weight of it. Kaelen did not do that. He stood at the window with his arms crossed, and he listened to all of it. The Thornwood line, her mother, the scattered bloodline, the old Alpha's conscription and refusal and destruction, and the carved bone, and what Osa had told her about what her wolf carried that other wolves did not. When she finished, he was quiet for a long time. The sound of the fortress below the window filled the silence. The smith, the hounds, the ordinary noise of a pack going about its morning. The Thornwood line, he said, finally. Yes, my father spoke of them once, Kata said. He called them a myth that weak wolves used to explain why they would not submit to stronger ones. Your father was wrong, Mara said. She said it plainly, without sharpness, as a fact. Kata looked at her, and something moved behind his eyes that she could not fully read. Yes, he said. I think he was. He moved from the window and sat down in the stone chair. He looked at the carved bone she had placed on the surface of the low table between them when she told the story. And he did not reach for it, but he looked at it the way a man looks at something he is reassessing the danger of. If what you are saying is true, he said, then you are the last of a bloodline that the old Alpha spent considerable effort erasing, and you are sitting in my fortress. While I and 6 of my guards put their hands on you 3 days ago, and you answered it in a way that no Omega in the history of this pack has ever answered anything. Yes, Mara said. The old Alpha's allies will know about the Great Hall by now, Kata said. Word moves faster than wolves in this territory. When they hear that an Omega destroyed 6 elite guards and the Alpha of the Iron Pack stripped those guards rather than the Omega, they will begin asking questions about who she is. And when will they find the answer, Mara asked. They will come here, Kata said, or they will send someone here. Because a living Thornwood wolf is a problem for every arrangement the old Alpha built before he died. Those arrangements still hold power in 3 packs to the east and 1 to the north. Oh, they will not want you walking around in full knowledge of what you are. Mara looked at him steadily. Then what do you want from me? Kael leaned forward in the stone chair. I want to know if you intend to stay in this territory. The question surprised her. She had expected conditions, she had expected negotiation dressed as generosity. She had not expected the question to be that direct or that simple. I have not decided, she said honestly. Then let me give you a reason to decide towards staying, Kael said. The Iron Pack has held this territory for 4 generations without the kind of ally that a Thornwood wolf represents. Our borders are pressured from the east consistently. I have held them through numbers and through the loyalty of wolves who fight for land rather than for blood. And that is a thinner thread than I would like. You want to use my bloodline, Mara said. I want to offer you a place in this pack that matches what you actually are, Kael said. Not what you were told you were at the ranking ceremony, not what Bren and his kind decided you were on an eastern trail. What you actually are. Mara looked at the carved bone on the table. She thought about her mother making the same kind of calculation in different circumstances, choosing refusal being scattered for it. She thought about what Osa had said. Kael is afraid of many things, but he is not afraid of strength the way his father was. The Thornwood wolf does not submit by rank, she said. Osa told me, and I am telling you so that you hear it clearly. If I stay as what I am, not as an Omega reclassified for your convenience, not as a useful bloodline kept in a smaller room than it deserves. Kaelen held her gaze. I understand. I do not think you fully do yet, she said, but I think you are willing to learn it. That is enough for now. A silence settled between them that was not uncomfortable. It had the quality of 2 people who have said the true things and are now sitting with the weight of them before deciding what to move next. Then the door of the great chamber opened. It was one of the perimeter guards, a young wolf named Tav, who ran messages between the watchtower and the Alpha's chamber. He came in fast and stopped and looked at Kaelen with the tight expression of someone carrying news they did not want to carry. Riders at the north boundary, Tav said. 4 wolves in the colors of the Ashvin pack. They are asking to speak with the Alpha directly. Kaelen looked at Mara. The Ashvin pack answers to the old Alpha's eastern allies, he said quietly. I know, Mara said. She had not known the name, but she knew the pattern. This was what Osa had said would come. They will say they are here for a border discussion, Kaelen said. They will ask to walk the fortress. They will be looking for you. Yes, she said. Kaelen stood. Stay in the elders' quarter until I send for you. Do not go into the yard. She stood also. I'm not going to hide in the elders' quarter. He looked at her. I'm not asking you to hide. I'm asking you to give me one conversation before they see you so that I can understand what I am dealing with before they do. It was a reasonable ask. She recognized it as such even while the wolf in her chest resisted it. Because the wolf had spent 3 seasons being told to stay out of sight and had finished with that. One conversation, she said. Then I will not stay hidden regardless of what you decide. He nodded. That is fair. She took the carved bone from the table and left the chamber. In the corridor outside, she could hear Tav's feet already going fast back towards the watchtower and the distant shift of the fortress around her as the pack absorbed the news of riders at the north boundary. She went to the elders' quarter. Osa was there already seated, already waiting, with 2 cups of something hot on the table between the chairs. Ashfallen pack, Mara said, sitting down. I heard, Osa said. Drink. Mara drank. It was bitter and strong, and it steadied something in her that the conversation with Kador had pulled loose. He offered me a place, Mara said. I know, Osa said. You told him to. I told him what you were, Osa said. What he did with it was his own choice. Mara turned the cup in her hands. If the Ashfallen wolves are here for me, it will not end with one conversation in the Alpha's chamber. No, Osa said. It will not. Then what do I do? Osa looked at her over the rim of her own cup with the patience of a woman who has watched many storms come and has survived all of them by knowing which ones to shelter from and which ones to walk into. You already know what you do, Osa said. Mara was quiet. The wolf in her chest breathed steadily. Not the covered fire anymore. Not even the open flame of the great hall. Something more settled than both, and something that had found its shape and was comfortable in it for the first time in 3 seasons, or perhaps for the first time ever. She set the cup down. "I need to know everything about the Ashfall Pack," she said. "Who leads them, how many wolves they run on their borderlines, what they owe the Eastern allies, and how long they have owed it." Osa smiled. It was a small smile, and it came and went quickly, but it was the realest expression Mara had seen on the elder's face since the night in the yard after the Great Hall. "Now you are asking the right questions," Osa said, and began to tell her. The 4 Ashfall wolves came through the north gate in human form. That was deliberate. The humans said they were here to talk. It said they were not challenging the Iron Pack's borders by force. It said everything that a diplomatic entry was supposed to say, and none of it was true, and every wolf in the fortress yard who watched them come through the gate understood that the form the entry took and the intention behind it were 2 separate things. Their leader was a man named Growth. He was older than Kedar by at least 15 years, with the build of a wolf who had been large in his youth and had let the years add to it rather than reduce it. He wore the Ashfern mark openly, a double-ridged scar on both shoulders rather than one, which was the Ashfern custom for their senior wolves. He moved through the yard with the ease of a man who has walked into other packs' fortresses many times and never once felt unwelcome enough to alter his pace. Kaelen received him in the yard rather than the Great Chamber. That was also deliberate. The Great Chamber was for conversations Kaelen wanted contained. The yard was for conversations he wanted the pack to see. Grath, Kaelen said. Kaelen Grath said they did not use titles with each other, which said something about the history between their packs, that it was long enough for familiarity and tense enough that the familiarity was a kind of weapon rather than a comfort. "You have come far for a border discussion," Kaelen said. "The borders concern us," Grath said. "There have been reports of unusual wolf activity in your eastern forest, wolves moving outside the established trails, how we want to ensure the Iron Pack's territory lines are being properly maintained." It was a clean lie. Mara, standing inside the doorway of the Elder's Quarter with the door open, 2 fingers width, heard it and understood exactly what it was covering. Unusual wolf activity. That was how they described her shift in the Great Hall, filtered through 3 days of rumor moving across pack borders. Osa had given her everything she asked for the previous evening. The Ashfern pack ran 14 wolves on their eastern borderline, not the 20 they claimed in territorial declarations. Their leader Grath had held his position for 20 years through alliance with the old Alphas network rather than through the loyalty of his own wolves. Which meant his authority was borrowed rather than earned. And borrowed authority had a particular kind of fragility. They owed 3 seasons of grain tribute to the Eastern Allied packs, a debt that had grown while their border numbers shrank. And a pack carrying that kind of debt was a pack that needed to deliver something valuable to stay in the network's good standing. She was the valuable thing they had come to deliver. Not by force. They were too few for force inside an established fortress, by identification. They would confirm she was here, confirm what she was, and return to the Eastern Allies with that information. And then the Allies would decide how to move against her and against any pack foolish enough to shelter her. Kayla was walking Groth through the yard, now showing him the perimeter walls, and discussing the eastern boundary markers in the measured tones of 2 men talking about geography when they were talking about something else entirely. The 3 other Ashfall wolves stood near the gate and watched the yard, and Mara watched them watch it. One of the 3 was looking at the Elder's Quarter, not casually, with the focused patience of a wolf who has been given a specific description and is checking it against what he sees. He was young, younger than the others, with a stillness about him that was trained rather than natural. He had been told what to look for. Mara stepped back from the door. She looked at Osa, who was sitting at the table behind her. The young one near the gate, Mara said quietly. "I see him," Asa said. "He knows what I look like." "Someone described you to them before they rode," Asa said. "Someone inside this fortress." They looked at each other. "Bren," Mara said. Asa nodded once. "He has kin in the Ashfall territory. I should have considered it sooner." Mara turned back to the door. Through the gap, she could see Kador and Groth still moving along the yard's perimeter. The conversation between them carrying the surface tension of 2 men being very careful about what they said and how they said it. Kador did not yet know about Bren. He did not yet know that the identification was already half done before the Ashfall wolves came through the gate. She had 2 choices. She could stay in the Elder's Quarter and let Kador handle the conversation and hope that Groth left without confirmation of what he had come to confirm. That was the careful choice. The choice that gave Kador room to manage the diplomatic layer of it without her presence complicating things. Or she could walk into the yard. If she walked into the yard, the young wolf near the gate would see her and confirm what Bren had described, and Growth would have what he came for. But Kador would also see her, and more importantly, the entire pack would see her. And the thing that had been building since the Great Hall, the shift in how the pack moved around her, would either solidify into something real or it would not. A packless Omega hiding in the Elders' Quarter while the people who wanted to erase her bloodline stood in the yard was not something she was willing to be. She pushed the door open and walked out. The yard did not go quiet this time the way it had when she walked toward the Great Hall 4 nights ago. And this time the yard went still, which is different. Quiet is the absence of sound, still is the presence of attention. Every eye in the yard moved to her. The young ash fen wolf near the gate found her face and held it, and she saw the recognition move through him, and she met his eyes without looking away. Grath noticed. She could see the moment he noticed because his conversation with Kaelen stopped mid-word and he turned and looked at her across the yard. And his face did the thing faces do when something confirms a fear that was already present. Kaelen looked at her too. His expression was controlled, but she could read the layer beneath the control. He had asked her for one conversation before she came into the yard. She had given him that. What she had not told him was that the conversation would not be enough time. Grath turned back to Kaelen. "Who is she?" he asked. The diplomatic tone was gone. What replaced it was direct and flat. "A member of this pack," Kaelen said. "She is not listed in the Iron Pack's territorial declaration," Grath said. "I have read your last 3 declarations. There is no wolf of her description in them. She came to us after the last declaration was filed," Kaelen said. "She will be in the next one." Grath looked at Mara again. She had crossed the yard and was standing now at a distance from both men that was close enough to be part of the conversation and far enough to be her own position in it rather than Kata's. "What is your bloodline?" Garth asked her directly. "Thornwood," she said. The name landed in the yard like a stone dropped in still water. The rings of it moved outward through every wolf who heard it. Some of them knew the name from the old stories, some of them knew it only as a word that adults had spoken in lowered voices when they were children. All of them felt the weight of it. Garth's face went through several things quickly. She watched all of them. Confirmation calculation, the particular unease of a man who has been handed exactly what he came for and is now realizing that the handing of it was not on his terms. The Thornwood line was scattered, Garth said. Declared extinct. Declarations are not always accurate, Mara said. Garth looked at Kata. You understand what sheltering this wolf means for your relationship with the Eastern Allied Pacts. I understand it precisely, Kata said. Same, do you understand what it means for your relationship with the Iron Pack if you leave this yard having threatened a member of my pack inside my walls? The stillness in the yard deepened. Garth's 3 wolves near the gate had shifted their positions without being obvious about it, moving slightly apart from each other the way wolves move when they are preparing for something. The Iron Pack's perimeter guards had noticed and moved also, and the yard had the tight, invisible geometry of a space where something could happen in any direction. Garth looked at Mara one more time. She looked back at him and did not shift her weight or cross her arms or do any of the things a person does when they are trying to look unafraid. She simply stood there and let him look and let him see that what he was looking at was not what Bren had described and not what the old Alphas' allies had been counting on when they sent him here. They had been counting on a weak, packless Omega that a pack of 4 could extract or threaten into leaving. That was not what was standing in this yard. Grath made his decision. She could see it happen. We will return to Ashvan, he said to Cadwal. This conversation will continue through formal channels. I look forward to it, Cadwal said. The 4 Ashvan wolves left through the north gate. The yard held its stillness until the gate closed behind them, and then the sound came back gradually. The hounds and the smith and the voices, all of it returning like water filling a space that had briefly been emptied. Cadwal walked where Mara stood. He did not speak immediately. He looked at the closed gate and then at the yard around them and then at her. You said one conversation, he said. I gave you one conversation, she said. It was not enough time. You knew it before I came out. He was quiet for a moment. Bran told them. Yes, I will deal with that. I know you will, she said. He looked at her with an expression that was not quite what she expected from an Alpha who had just had his careful diplomatic management walked through by an Omega who had been in his pack for 3 seasons without a rank. What she expected was anger. What she saw was something closer to recognition. The next formal channel they send, he said, will not be for wolves asking questions. No, she said it will not. Then we need to be ready, he said. He looked at her steadily. Are you ready? The wolf in her chest breathed once deep and even. Yes, she said. The preparation took 7 days. Cato moved through those 7 days with a focused urgency that Mara had not seen in him before. He sent riders to 2 neighboring packs whose relationships with the Iron Pack were old enough to carry weight: the Stone Marrow Pack to the west and the Deep Run Pack to the south. Packs that had no debt to the Eastern Allied network and no love for the arrangements the old Alpha had built before his death. He pulled his border wolves back from the thinner eastern lines and doubled them on the approaches most likely to be used by a pack moving in force. He dealt with Bren directly, and finally as stripping the man of his remaining privileges inside the fortress and sending him to the outermost border post where his knowledge of ash fan movements might still be useful even if his presence inside the walls no longer was. And every evening of those 7 days he sat with Mara in the great chamber and they talked. Not about strategy, though. Strategy was always present beneath the surface of it. They talked about the Thornwood line, about what Osa had told her and what the carved bone meant and what it felt like to carry a bloodline that had been declared extinct while it was still very much alive inside her. Cato listened the way he had listened in that first conversation fully and without interrupting, and he asked questions that surprised her with their precision. On the 5th evening, he asked the question she had been waiting for without knowing she was waiting for it. When you shifted in the great hall, he said, "Was that the first time your wolf had fully come forward?" "Yes," she said. "What held it back before?" She thought about this carefully before answering. "I was told from the moment I arrived here what I was. Packless low-rank Omega without bloodline claim. When enough voices tell you a thing for long enough, some part of you begins to manage yourself according to what they say. The wolf knew better, but I kept it under the weight of what I had been told." "And what changed that night on the Eastern Trail?" he asked. Bren said I was nothing, she said. He had said similar things before, and others had said similar things, and I had carried each one and kept the wolf quiet. But that night, something in the way he said it, the certainty of it, the complete indifference of it, something reached a depth in me that the others had not reached. She paused. He was so sure, and his sureness was so complete that it broke something loose instead of pressing it down further. Kaelen was quiet for a moment. "He meant to diminish you, and instead he freed you." "Yes," she said. "There is something almost fair about that," he said. She looked at him. "Almost." On the 7th day, the Eastern Wolves came. They came at dawn, which was the preferred time of the old Alpha's allies for border crossings because dawn was when Fortress Wolves were changing their watch rotations and the gap between the outgoing guard and the incoming one was a reliable weakness. They came in wolf form, which said this was not a diplomatic entry. And they came in numbers that the Iron Pack's watchtower scout counted as 30 before he lit the signal fire on the tower's top stone. 30 wolves against a fortress that held 42 capable fighters if you counted every wolf who could shift and hold a line. Mara was in the yard when the signal fire went up. She had not slept that night, not from fear, but from the particular alertness that had settled into her body over the past 7 days. The wolf's awareness that something was coming and the human mind's agreement that preparation and rest were different needs, and this morning required the first one. Kaeldor came from the tower at a run. Around the yard, the Iron Pack was already moving, wolves shifting in doorways and along the walls. On the perimeter guard, taking their positions with the practiced speed of wolves who had been drilling for exactly this for 7 days. He reached her in the center of the yard. 30, he said. I heard. She said. The Stone Marrow and Deep Run riders will not arrive until midday at the earliest, he said. We hold until then. We hold, she agreed. He looked at her. You do not have to be at the wall. Your value to this pack is not Kaeldor, she said. He stopped. I am not staying behind the wall, she said. He held her gaze for a moment and then he nodded once, and turned to take his position at the east gate because the watchtower signals said that was the direction the 30 were coming from through the eastern forest. One along the trail where 6 elite guards had found a packless Omega walking alone 3 weeks ago and decided she was nothing worth considering. The eastern trail. She almost found something like dark humor in that. The Iron Pack held the wall for the first part of it. The Eastern Allied wolves hit the gate hard and the gate held, and the wolves on top of the wall answered the assault with the full force of 42 fighters who had spent 7 days being told clearly what was at stake and why. There was nothing abstract about the defense. These were wolves protecting their own walls and their own pack, and the difference between wolves fighting for territory and wolves fighting for something they have chosen is significant and visible in the way they move. But 30 against 42 with the attackers in wolf form and the defenders split between wall positions and ground positions was a mathematics that pressed hard on the Iron Pack regardless of their motivation. The East Gate held for a time and then it did not. It came apart at the lower iron binding, the oldest binding, the one the first smith had beaten into shape generations ago and which had not been replaced because it had always held before. The wood behind it cracked and the gate swung and the eastern wolves came through in a mass of dark fur and forward momentum, and the yard became the kind of place that yards become when a gate fails and two sides meet inside a confined space. Mara shifted at the gate. The Thornwood wolf rose in the gap where the gate had been, and the eastern wolves coming through pulled up short the way water pulls up short against a boulder that appears suddenly in a stream's path. Not because she was larger than all of them, though she was larger than most, but because of what the wolf carried that other wolves felt before they understood what they were feeling. The Thornwood bloodline did not submit to pack hierarchy. That was what Osa had told her. What Osa had not fully explained, or perhaps what could not be fully explained in words and had to be experienced directly, was what that meant from the other side. A wolf that does not submit to hierarchy does not broadcast submission. Every wolf in any pack at any moment is constantly broadcasting their position in the hierarchy through their scent and their posture and the quality of their movement. It was automatic, it was as natural as breathing. Even Kador did it. Even the Eastern Allied wolves' strongest fighters did it, asserting their dominance downward and acknowledging the dominance above them simultaneously. A constant, invisible negotiation that structured every interaction between wolves without them thinking about it. Mara's wolf broadcasted nothing, no submission, no dominance assertion, no position in any hierarchy because the Thornwood wolf recognized no hierarchy it had not chosen. It stood outside the entire structure and to the wolves facing it across the broken gate, but that blankness where the expected signals should have been was profoundly and instinctively wrong in a way that struck deeper than strategy or training. 3 of the eastern wolves shifted back to human form without deciding to. Their bodies made the choice before their minds caught up, pulling back from the wolf form the way a hand pulls back from unexpected heat. The one still in wolf form hesitated. That hesitation was enough. Kaelen hit the eastern wolves' left flank with 6 iron pack wolves moving together, and the momentum of the assault from the wall combined with the hesitation at the gate broke the eastern formation apart. A broken formation in a confined yard is a crisis for the side whose formation breaks because wolves in a yard fight differently than wolves in open forest. The walls and buildings creating angles and corners that a disorganized pack cannot adapt to quickly. The eastern wolves adapted anyway because 30 trained fighters did not stop being 30 trained fighters because their entry went wrong. They reorganized with a speed that Mara noticed and respected even as she moved through the gap in the gate and into the press of the fight. She did not fight the way she had fought in the Great Hall. The Great Hall had 6 wolves in a confined space, and the task had been to end each one without killing, which required control and precision. This was different. This was a fortress defense with 42 wolves depending on the line holding and 30 wolves pressing it. And the task here was not precision. The task was to be the thing in the fight that the other side could not plan for. She moved through the eastern wolves like water finding the lowest ground. Not in a straight line, not in any line that could be predicted and countered. The Thornwood wolf moved according to something older than tactics. An animal intelligence that the 3 seasons of being told she was nothing had not touched because it lived below the level where words and decorations reach. Grath was there. She found him in the eastern formation because he was where a leader goes when a formation breaks. At the center, holding it together by his presence. He had shifted, and his wolf was the largest in the eastern group by a significant measure. Gray and heavy-shouldered, and he was doing what large dominant wolves do in broken fights. Positioning himself as the fixed point around which his wolves could reorganize. She went toward him. There he saw her coming, and he turned to meet her, and they came together in the yard with the sound of the gate broken behind them, and the iron pack, and the eastern wolves fighting across every corner of the space, and the morning light coming over the fortress wall and making everything sharp and clear and without shadow. Grath was strong. She acknowledged that clearly inside the fight. The acknowledgement that a wolf makes when they meet something real rather than something they had expected to be smaller than it was. He was strong and he was experienced, and 20 years of leading the Ashvin pack had given him a depth of fighting knowledge that pure power alone does not produce. But the Thornwood wolf did not fight according to the logic he knew. He pressed where she yielded, and she was not there when the press landed. As he anticipated, and she was already somewhere the anticipation had not accounted for. He tried to read her the way a dominant wolf reads a challenger, and found nothing to read because she was not challenging his position in any hierarchy. She was simply present and moving, and every instinct his wolf had developed over 20 years of fights kept reaching for a structure that was not there. She put him down. Not quickly. It took time, and it cost her a bite across the shoulder that matched the one Pell had given her in the Great Hall and would leave the same kind of mark which she decided in the moment was almost appropriate. But she put him down, and she held him the same way she had held Bren. Jaws at the back of the neck, the hold that ends things, and his wolf went still beneath it. When Garth went still, the Eastern wolves knew. Packs feel their leader the way a body feels its spine. When the spine goes, the body knows before the mind processes it. A sudden wrongness that reaches every part simultaneously. The Eastern wolves felt Garth go still, and the fight went out of them in a wave that moved from the wolves nearest to him outward to the edges of the yard. The fighting stopped. Not all at once. The edges took longer than the center, and there were 2 Iron Pack wolves still pressing Eastern wolves into corners before the word reached them that it was over. But it stopped. The yard settled into the heavy breathing and the small sounds of the aftermath. Mara released Garth and stepped back and shifted to human form. Though her shoulder was bleeding and her body carried the weight of the fight in every part of it, and she stood straight anyway because this was not the moment to be anything less than upright. Kaeldor stood across the yard. He was in human form, breathing hard, a cut across his jaw that would scar. He looked at the yard, at the Eastern wolves standing or sitting or lying in various states, at his own pack around them at the broken gate behind Mara. He looked at her. She looked back at him. The Eastern wolves who could walk were gathered and taken to the inner holding pens that the Iron Pack used for captured border wolves. Grath was helped upright by 2 of his wolves, and he stood in the yard with the flatness of a man who has lost the thing his entire position depended on and has not yet begun to calculate what comes next. And he looked at Mara once, and she met his eyes, and he looked away. By midday, the Stone Marrow and Deep Run riders arrived to find the Eastern assault already finished. The yard being cleared, the healer Voss moving between the wounded with the tight efficiency that emergencies brought out in her. By evening, Kaeldor had sent formal messages to 3 more packs announcing that the Iron Pack had repelled an unprovoked assault from the Eastern Allied Network and requesting that the network's arrangements and debts be brought to a full territorial council for review. It was a bold move, the kind of move that reshapes territorial politics for a generation if it holds and destroys a pack if it does not. Mara sat with Osa in the Elder's Quarter that evening while the fortress settled into the particular quiet of a place that has been through something and survived it. The council will not be simple, Osa said. No, Mara said. The Eastern allies will send representatives who will challenge your bloodline claim formally. They will try to have the Thornwood line declared extinct again through council vote rather than through force, since force did not work. Let them try, Mara said. Osa looked at her. You will have to stand before the full territorial council and claim the Thornwood name openly. Every pack present will have to decide what to do with that claim. I know, Mara said. Are you ready for that? Osa asked. Mara held the carved bone in her palm. The warmth of it was steady and familiar now, like a voice she had always known and only recently begun to hear clearly. She thought about her mother walking through this territory 8 years ago with this same object pressed against her skin, carrying the half-told secret, trusting a near stranger elder with the continuation of a line that the powerful had decided should not continue. She thought about a clearing on an eastern trail and a broken water jar and dirt and 6 wolves who had looked at her and seen nothing. She thought about standing up. My mother started to tell me something once, Mara said, about what the women of our line carry. She did not finish it before she died. I know, Osa said quietly. I think I understand now what she was going to say, Mara said. She was going to say that it was not about the wolf. The wolf is part of it, but it is not the whole of it. What the Thornwood line carries is the knowledge that what you are told you are and what you actually are have nothing to do with each other. That is what the old Alpha feared, not the wolf, the refusal to accept his definition of it. Osa was quiet for a long moment. Yes, she said. That is exactly what she was going to say. Mara closed her hand around the carved bone. Outside the Elder's Quarter, the fortress breathed in its evening rhythms, and somewhere at the east gate, the packsmith was already measuring the broken binding to replace it, and the hounds were settling, and the torches were being lit one by one along the yard walls. The Iron Pack was still standing. She was still standing. Whatever the Territorial Council brought, whatever the Eastern allies sent through formal channels, whatever the next challenge looked like when it arrived, she would stand before it as what she was. Not what 6 guards had decided she was on an Eastern trail. Not what a ranking ceremony had declared her. Not what 3 seasons of being made small had almost convinced her to accept. the last of the Thornwood line, fully awake, fully present and done being told she was nothing.